Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to welcome you to our webinar from studio to gallery. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stella Chan, and I am your host together with Alicia Thompson today. Before we dive in, just a bit of context. This webinar is hosted by the Salmagundi Club through the Junior and Scholarship Committee, where I currently serve as a chair. This committee focuses on creating professional development opportunities and conversations that support artists between the age of 21 and 35 at different stages of their careers. But if you look around, we get all different age groups today, which I'm really, really excited. So we have a full schedule today with a pack house. So without further delay, I'm very excited to have our guest speaker, Victoria J. Fry, with us today. So Victoria is a visual artist, curator, and the gallery director of Worms Contemporary, as well as the founder of Visionary Art Collective. She's actively working with artists and galleries right now. And today she'll be sharing real practical insight into what the studio to gallery path actually looks like, not the polished version you see online. And sorry for my croaking voice, I'm actually sick. Anyways, but what's even more exciting is that there are two bonuses she's offering today as a courtesy to our Samagandi community. Victoria has generously offered complimentary access to her pre-recorded bio and artist statement workshop, a standalone resource that is no, well, how do I put this? Normally you had to pay for. So we really truly appreciate her making this available to you. Just go to your chat box now and you will see the link. And then she will talk more about it towards the end of the webinar. In addition, for artists she has not previously worked with, she is offering a limited number of one-on-one consultation sessions at a special introductory rate for a 45-minute session. For those who are interested in learning more, the relevant links are also in the chat box, or you can talk to her afterwards. She will also go a little bit into it after our presentation ends. So because we have a full house today, we have decided to extend our Q&A from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So the way that's going to work is that use the raise hand icon, which is at the bottom of your Zoom bar right next to the share button. And when you raise your hand, I'll call your name and you can unmute yourself and then you can ask Victoria your questions directly. You can share with her what type of artist you are, oil painter, watercolorist, or illustrator. And please ask your questions concisely and be mindful of time. We will try to get through as many as we can. If you wish to remain anonymous, please submit your questions in the chat box and Alicia will read it out for you. This video obviously is being recorded and it will be shared with you a week from today. And we will also be posting on Salmagundi YouTube channel 1 month later. Lastly, gonna do a little plug for Salmagundi. If you are not from Salmagundi, but you are interested in learning more about Salmagundi membership, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is also in the chat box and it's jrscholarship@salmagundi.org. All right, Victoria, the stage is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stella, for the beautiful intro. I'm so happy to see you all this morning. I think this is going to be a really great way to start the weekend together. And yeah, as Stella mentioned, I dropped the link to the bio and statement workshop. It's my signature pre-recorded workshop for writing a polished and professional artist bio and statement. That is in the chat. Just a heads up, it's a private link created through Vimeo. So you'll just need to enter the password, which is Salmagundi26 in all caps, to access the pre-recorded workshop. And it's about an hour in length. So feel free to check that out later on today or just whenever you have a moment to run through it. And Stella, will that also be sent out in an email perhaps to
Sure.
attendees? Or yeah, okay. We can send you a copy through email as well, just in case. All right, I'm so happy to be here. I love working with artists. I am an artist. I always say, I'm a gallery director and a curator and a mentor, but first and foremost, I am a visual artist. I'm a painter. So I'm going to be sharing with you Today, best practices for working with galleries from the perspective of a gallery owner and the perspective of a curator. But because I'm also an artist, just know that I am here in the trenches with you and we're all we're all doing this together. So let me go ahead and share you on my screen and we will get started. Let me just make this a little bit larger. Okay. And as Stella also mentioned, we have our Q&A at the end. So what I'm just going to encourage everyone to do for now is if you have questions throughout the workshop, just jot them down in a notebook. So I would recommend if you have a piece of paper, a journal, a notebook, that would be great. But yeah, just make a note of any questions that come to mind as we move through, and I'll do my best to answer them when we get to the Q&A. So as you know, the title of this presentation today is From Studio to Gallery, What Curators and Gallerists Are Really Looking For. I think there can be a lot of mystery around this. And so hopefully today I can kind of like demystify some of these things for you. Um, and yeah, and just thank you so much for inviting me to do this today, Stella. I'm really happy to be here. So we'll take a moment to just introduce ourselves. I know there are so many of us here today, so thank you all for joining and for taking the time to be with us. But if you could, in the chat, just write your name and location, the kind of work you create. And I would love to know, before we get started, what's one thing you're most interested in learning about when it comes to working with galleries? So what is a question that you have right now, or one thing you just really want to know when it comes to partnering with a gallery? So if you could just write that in the chat, that would be awesome. Let me make sure I can still access the chat. Okay, great. Cool. So let's see. Great. So yeah, if you want to share your name, your location, the kind of work you create, one thing you are excited to learn today. We'll just take a few minutes to get to know each other. Hari, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, but let me know if I'm not. New York City sketches, how galleries curate. Awesome. Joseph, Jersey City, figure painting and sculpting. Very cool. I want to commercialize my work. Cool. Okay, Christine, oil painter, Frederick, Maryland, representational oil painter. Beautiful. Kinga, let's see, photographer. And I apologize in advance if I'm mispronouncing any names. Feel free to let me know. You can just unmute yourself and tell me. Let's see, Laura, North Central New Jersey, collage from rescued books and magazines, successfully approaching new galleries with cold emails, calls, and letters. Okay, great. Christine from Farmingdale, New York, oil painter. Cool. See, Angela, oil painter, author, illustrator, Manhasset, New York, how to approach galleries professionally. Perfect. Lori writes, Long Island, she's from Long Island, realistic figurative portraits, landscapes and watercolor pastel oils, how to find galleries that would consider representing me. Great. Let's see, Louis, let's see, St. Petersburg, Florida. From a protege to Salvador Dali, painting in oil and 3D holographic particulars as an evolution and continue. Very cool. Wow. Susan from Greenwich, Connecticut, acrylic abstractions, large size question, framing, hanging, other options. Okay, Patricia. Great. Cool. Awesome questions so far. It's really helpful to know before we get started what you are all interested in learning about. So hopefully we'll get to as much of this as we can. Looking for insight for a first solo gallery show. Derek, that's an awesome goal. Okay, Janet from Atkinson, New Jersey / New York City metro area, portrait, figurative, still life. Wonderful. Megan. Any cons to working with galleries? Yeah, we are going to talk about pros and cons. I have an entire slide dedicated for that. So that's perfect. Steve, plein air, New York City. Great. Okay. Continue to share if you haven't already. I think for the sake of time, because it is coming up to 11:15, we're just going to jump right in because I have so much content to share with you today. But thank you all for sharing. And if I didn't get to your message in the chat, I will do my best to read it later. But again, feel free to share if you haven't already. But yeah, we'll just jump right in and get started. Stella, thank you so much again for the generous introduction. I'll just share a little bit about myself. My name is Victoria. I graduated from the School of Visual Arts here in New York City in 2012, and I went on to get my master's from Maine College of Art and Design in 2014. I launched my company, Visionary Art Collective, which I often refer to as VAC, in 2020 to uplift artists through opportunities, resources, and community. Um, One thing I often share is before I actually launched Visionary Art Collective, I was running a blog. So my blog actually evolved into VAC organically. But it was a blog for a while where I was interviewing and spotlighting emerging artists from around the world. So it's kind of a natural progression into a larger platform. Since launching, I have had the pleasure of working with thousands of artists at this point from literally all around the world to help them grow and advance their art careers. And that's through my one-on-one mentorship program, through my online courses, my workshops, and now all the work we're doing at the gallery. One of the best parts for me, in addition to working with artists, is having the opportunity to collaborate with curators and gallerists across the contemporary art world, which has been really exciting. We have a magazine, a print and digital magazine called New Visionary, which I launched in January of 2022. I run a podcast called the New Visionary Podcast. Excuse me. And I launched that in September of 2022. So we are in our third season now. I have interviews, but I also do a lot of solo episodes where I share advice for emerging artists. And then I opened my gallery in September of 2023. So we're coming up 3 years this fall, which has been my latest project. And we are located in Gowanus, in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn. So just a few things there. And then, as I mentioned, you're invited to take notes, jot down any thoughts or questions. You will receive a PDF copy of this entire presentation as well, but you're more than welcome to take notes as we go. All right, so the way that I've structured this workshop today, because there's so much to share, I wanted to break it down into three key components. Part one, we're going to talk about building a strong foundation before approaching galleries. So thinking about the groundwork and what you can do to sort of prepare for working with these galleries that might be a good fit for you. Part two, we're going to talk about the gallery model, different kinds of galleries, what a good gallery what that would look like in terms of a good partnership that ideally would propel you and your career forward. And then part three, we're going to talk about how to cultivate relationships with galleries and curators, and then we'll move into the Q&A. I wanted to start by sharing this with you because this is my mentality when it comes to working with galleries, and this is going to kind of frame the presentation today. Empowered artists build strong gallery relationships. The strongest gallery relationships begin with empowered artists. So, this is not about waiting to be chosen by a gallery. It is about recognizing that you are choosing to. Gallery representation is not a pick me dynamic, it's a partnership rooted in mutual respect, clarity, and professionalism. Beyond technical skill, galleries are investing in vision, self-trust, and artists who confidently stand behind their work. When you lead from empowerment instead of permission seeking, everything shifts. This is really important for me to share with you at the beginning of this presentation because I think that so many of us as artists feel like we're just waiting for a gallery to choose us. And once we're chosen, everything is going to work out. And, that's kind of like the thing we're all working towards. But I really want to remind you as we move through the presentation today that you also want to find a gallery that is going to support you, right? It's a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's not about waiting to be chosen. It's about positioning yourself so that you can also choose a gallery that you feel is going to be the best fit for you. It's coming from that empowered and embodied perspective rather than feeling like, we're just kind of waiting on something. So the mindset is actually foundational to everything that comes. Part one, building a strong foundation before approaching galleries. Many artists ask me, what is the best way for me to prepare for working with a gallery or finding a gallery that feels like an aligned fit? So we're going to go into that. Let's talk about the studio prep. The first most important thing, I think, is having a cohesive body of work, right? And I think that goes without saying. The work is so important. We're looking for a unified visual language, work that speaks to itself as a collection rather than sort of isolated one-off pieces. Technical skill is important, but having a strong concept and having a vision is really important. Ultimately, galleries are looking for your point of view. They want to understand how your experience informs the work you create. So, what is your perspective? What is your point of view? For a long time, I painted landscapes. And the question that I would often ask is, how does the way that I approach landscape differ from another landscape painter, right? It's the same subject, but how am I filtering this through my lens? How is my approach to landscape different from another artist? How does my lived experience inform the way that I paint landscapes? That's something I want you to continue to be thinking about as you develop your work. Having a clear theme and intention, I think, is really important as well. You want to have a defined through line, an ability to articulate what the work explores. Oftentimes, artists will ask me how they can strengthen the way that they talk about their work. And what I always say is start with writing about your work, which is also why I wanted to include my complimentary workshop today. Because when you write an artist's statement that feels really strong and professional and true, it's going to be easier for you to write about your work in a way, or I'm sorry, to talk about your work in a way that feels um, authentic, but also polished. And so I would always say start with the writing and then practice speaking from there. And I think a lot of this comes down to having confidence in your why. So first knowing, why are you choosing this subject or this theme? What's resonating with you? Thinking about your personal connection to the work as well, but getting clear on your why. So, I'll just use myself again as an example when it came to painting landscape. Like, why was that such an important thing for me? Why was I drawn to the landscape? And then how does my personal connection tie into that? So knowing your why, I think, is like absolutely essential, and then being able to articulate that. Strong documentation is key. As I'm sure you all know, having high resolution, color accurate images is everything. Clean cropping, professional presentation, detail shots. In addition to the work that I do for my gallery, I've had the privilege and honor of being invited to curate for quite a few organizations and curatorial platforms at this point. So I've reviewed thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions over the last, let's say, 6 to 7 years. And every time I'm reviewing submissions, there are always beautiful, strong works of art that are not documented in a way that is going to lend itself to that particular opportunity. Perhaps the images are blurry or grainy or a little bit out of focus. The lighting is off. There might be dark shadows and bright spots. And even though I can kind of see that the work is strong, if the documentation is not strong, then, we're not always able to curate that artist into whatever the opportunity is. Because something to remember, I'm sure you all know, but I often remind myself as well that in this day and age, most people who are viewing your work and making a decision about whether or not to invest in you and your work are basing that decision off of the images that you present online. Whether it's a gallery, a curator, or a potential collector, they're looking at your images. So the work has to be strong, but the images also have to be strong. So just keeping that in mind. And then pricing, so having a logical pricing structure, I would recommend by size and medium. I think is also foundational, and alignment with your experience in the market. So just thinking about where you're at in your career and then pricing accordingly, doing a little bit of market research as well. I do find that oftentimes emerging artists and early career artists tend to underprice their work. And yes, we all have to start somewhere, but I also want to make sure that you price your work in a way that really values what you're making. So, um, I have a couple of quick sort of rules of thumb here that I can share with you before we go on. One is a rule that I came up with a few years ago was no original work under $100 ever, even if it's something really small. There are so many artists I've worked with that have an original painting that is maybe like 5 by 7 inches or 6 by 8 inches that is priced under $100. No, I don't think any original should be priced under 100. I think that would be like a baseline. Um, and the other thing is if you're using a square inch model, I wouldn't recommend pricing any work under $1 per square inch. I think that $1 per square inch is also like an absolute minimum for pricing your artwork. That is just my perspective on pricing. I don't know if we'll have time during our workshop today to go into an entire pricing overview because I could teach an entire workshop just on pricing, but those are just a couple of quick things I wanted to share with you. Mostly making sure your pricing is progressing in a way that makes sense. Okay, refining your materials. So you want to make sure that in addition to having strong work and really good images of the work, you also want to make sure that you're presenting it in a way online that feels polished and professional and is an accurate representation of you as an artist. Your website is one of the most important materials to invest your time and energy in. When a gallery director or a curator discovers your work, whether they see it at an art fair or perhaps you meet with them in person and you give them your business card, the first thing they're going to do is go to your website and probably also to your social media page, most likely your Instagram. So, making sure that your website is sleek, professional, up to date, that your homepage is not too crowded, but visually impactful, organized, and easy to navigate is of the utmost importance. When artists often ask me, how do I organize my website? How do I organize the work specifically on my website? Normally, what I recommend is organizing your work by either year in reverse chronological order, by series, which is how I organize my work, or by subject or medium. So there are different options, but it's thinking about what makes the most sense for you and your work. Um, when I say a visually impactful homepage, what I usually suggest is just having one large, really good image of a recent painting or a recent artwork on your homepage versus having so many images to where it can feel a little bit disorienting. Something I often say is through your website, your goal, I think, as an artist, is to replicate the gallery experience, but in a digital way. So if you think about stepping into a high-end contemporary art gallery, perhaps in Chelsea, right? You walk in and it's usually clean white walls with maybe a few artworks on each wall. So it's a really kind of minimal, way of showing the work. And I think because of that, you're able to experience and digest the work in the way that the artist and the gallery has intended. So it's like how to replicate that through your website. I tend to gravitate towards a more minimal presentation of the work, a clean white background, something that is as close as possible to, how you would view the work in a gallery setting in real life. Your updated your bio and statement are really important supplemental materials to accompany your work. You want to make sure that your statement is professional and authentic and that it sounds like you. I think that sometimes as artists, when we're writing a professional artist statement, we feel like we almost need to overly intellectualize our work for it to be important. You do want your statement to feel eloquent and polished, but you also want it to sound like you, and you want it to be authentic and meaningful and true. So I share more about this in my pre-recorded workshop, but I think that your statement is a really important material. And then your bio, you want your bio to be focused on you and your experience as an artist. So just making sure that you update that every few months or however often. Your CV, you want that to also be up to date, of course, specific to your art career. I have reviewed artist CVs in the past that kind of included all of their experience. Just remember, your CV as an artist is specific to your exhibition experience. And for any artist that is looking for a sort of a template or a reference for how to structure your CV, I can drop it in the chat, or Stella, perhaps you might drop it in the chat. There's an artist I love. Her name is Nikita Gale. And if you go to her website, her CV, I mean, it's very long, it's extensive because she's had so many exhibitions at this point, but I really love how she's formatted and structured her CV. And that's what I would recommend looking at as a reference and kind of structuring your CV in a similar way, just in terms of the format, because it's really clean, it's really easy to read, and I think it's a prime example of an artist CV. Okay, active and intentional social presence. So when I say social presence, I'm referring to social media, specifically Instagram. You want your Instagram to feel thoughtful and considered and always allowing the work to lead. I could teach an entire workshop just on social media presence for artists, and I have in the past because I built my entire company on Instagram, and I love social media. I think it's such a powerful tool for connection. But what I can just share today, some initial thoughts, are to make the first thing would be to make sure that your Instagram is feeling professional. It's essentially a digital portfolio. So I would encourage you all to, if you are on Instagram, to just do a little bit of like a self audit, scan through your Instagram page and imagine that you are a gallery director or a curator. Does it feel professional? Are you allowing the work to lead? Do you have maybe some personal images or outdated photos that you could archive or delete? Could you include some studio shots? Could you upload some photos of recent work or works in progress? Um, just, when it comes to Instagram, I always say like it's not about how often you post. It's not about posting every single day. It's just about being really thoughtful and intentional when you do post and making sure that it feels elevated. So when I've taught workshops on social media in the past for artists, something I often suggest is think of a gallery that you really love. I often use Mazzy Klein as an example. Mazzy Klein is a gallery, I believe, in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And they have such a beautiful space, but they also have such a beautiful social media page. If you go to their Instagram, the way they curate their Instagram page feels really thoughtful and clean and professional. And so if I was an artist and I wanted to exhibit with a gallery like Massey Klein, then the first thing I would do outside of actually visiting the gallery in person is I would go to their social media page and I would look to see how they curate their page. And I would think, is my Instagram matching that, right? Is it matching that kind of curation? What can I do to elevate my presence on social media so that it feels in alignment with how they curate and present their work on social media? So, a lot of what I'm going to teach today is about alignment, bringing yourself into alignment with the kinds of galleries that you might want to work with. Okay, building momentum. So, it is possible to work with a gallery right off the bat with very little exhibition experience. But I do find that many contemporary art galleries are going to be looking to work with artists who have some exhibition experience. I try to avoid general statements because it truly varies. And I have actually mentored artists before who had very little exhibition experience and were picked up by a big gallery. So it can happen, it does happen. But for the most part, I would recommend that you build some momentum in your career first. So when it comes to exhibitions, even small and local, I would recommend, of course, starting with group exhibitions, which might lead to a solo exhibition, or perhaps you might consider submitting a proposal for a solo exhibition. But what I always recommend to artists is prioritizing juried exhibitions with reputable guest jurors. So that might be an in-person exhibition, it might be a virtual exhibition, but thinking about the kind of platform, the kind of organization that you're working with, and who is the juror, right? Who is, if there's an individual that is curating or jurying the show, or sometimes it's a juried panel, just really doing your research. Are they affiliated with a gallery? Are they connected to an institution or a museum? Who is that person, or who are those people, if it's a juried panel, that are going to ultimately be reviewing your work, right? To consider you for that opportunity. And what kind of value might they bring? Does it feel like an aligned connection for you? So, thinking about traditional spaces like a gallery setting, perhaps non-traditional spaces. I've worked with artists who have exhibited their work at libraries or cafes or really beautiful high-end restaurants. I think when you're getting started, it's important to be open. Yes, you still want to be intentional, of course, but to also be open to different kinds of spaces and opportunities. But just making sure that whatever you put your time and energy into, especially when it comes to exhibitions, feels aligned and intentional for you. And again, always doing your research on those jurors or those juried panels, because um, I think it's really helpful and strategic from a career perspective to prioritize opportunities where you could potentially make a connection with a juror who is active in the art world. Okay, press. So, when it comes to press, there are so many different things. There are online and print publications, there are podcasts, there are blog features. Um, and I think that these can all, depending, right? It depends on the kind of opportunity, but good press or getting a really good feature in a blog or an art magazine, a contemporary art magazine, can really elevate you. A podcast is great because it gives you the opportunity to talk about your journey as an artist, to talk about the work. It's great practice for you. Um, and, there are different ways to go about this. When it comes to online, like digital or print publications, they often have open calls, like Create Magazine, for example. That's a really good publication. If they have open calls throughout the year. When it comes to podcasts, you can pitch to, if there's an art podcast you love, let's say the host features weekly or bi-weekly interviews with artists, you could write a pitch. But we're going to talk a little bit more later on about cultivating connections. So I'll share some thoughts with you. But the most important thing, I think, if you're pitching for a podcast, is to open with what you appreciate or what you love about that podcast, and then think about an angle. So rather than just saying, I'd love to come on the show and talk about my work, think about the kinds of topics that have been covered on that particular podcast, the kinds of conversations that that podcast host tends to engage in, and then think of an angle. What specifically could you bring to that episode if you were to be brought onto the podcast? So I can share more about that later, but those are just some initial thoughts. And sometimes blogs, depending on what the blog is, but sometimes they have a way to apply or submit to be considered for a feature. So those are just things to look out for as well. I think that when it comes to working with a gallery, setting up a studio visit is actually one of the most important things that you can do. I have an entire slide later on in the presentation dedicated to studio visits. I also recently released a podcast episode dedicated to talking about studio visits and what I recommend in terms of best practices. But a few things I'm going to share with you now would be to consider setting up studio visits with, yes, curators and gallerists, but also with fellow artists, especially if you're getting started and you're feeling a little bit nervous or perhaps intimidated. Invite some of your artist friends to do individual or perhaps group visits in your studio just to warm up and start practicing, talking about your work, showing your work. And then, of course, collectors, anyone that you've sold work to in the past. If you haven't sold work yet, but it's something you want to explore, then you might consider setting up a studio visit with a potential collector. So, really, anyone that has expressed interest in your work and has shared with you that they might want to invest at some point, bring them in for a studio visit. Studio visits have a level of intimacy that I think is essential to cultivating a strong relationship. So if you have a studio visit with, say, a gallery director or a curator, it's an opportunity for them to see your work outside of a gallery context, right? They're in your studio. The nature of that, it's going to be a little bit more intimate. And you can really share with them more about your work and how it's developed and your journey. And hopefully, they leave with a deeper understanding of not just what you're creating, but why you're creating it. So, studio visits are incredibly powerful for cultivating those kinds of connections. And then, of course, community involvement. When you are connected to fellow artists, I mean, you're all part of Salmagundi, which is incredible. You have a strong network here. Having a community of artists that you can turn to is so foundational for your art career. Not only do you want to be part of a community to be able to talk with other artists about the highs and lows of what it's like to build an art career, to get feedback on your work, and also to just be around other creatives that understand what this is like. You also want to connect with other artists because artists, I think, are one of your greatest resources when it comes to discovering new opportunities. I can't tell you how many times I've done a studio visit with an artist and they've shared with me that they're about to participate in a really good juried exhibition. And when I ask them how they discovered that particular opportunity, they will often share with me that it was through one of their artist friends. There are even some gallery directors that who will only work with new artists if those new artists are referred to them by an artist they already know. That's not always the case. So please don't leave today thinking that's the only way to work with a gallery director. But I've heard that, and I've actually spoken with gallery directors that tell me that they prefer to work with artists who are recommended to them by an artist they're already representing or working with in some capacity. So make sure that you have your community, your connections with fellow artists. Oftentimes, when I'm working with an artist, especially if they're at the beginning of their career, they almost want to like jump to the gallery director, jump to the curator, get represented immediately. And what I always remind them is, if we think about, I almost have like a vision for it. If you think about being on one side of like a river or a stream or a creek, right? And then on the other side is that thing that you're desiring. So let's say it's gallery representation. There are stepping stones along the way to get to that other side. And one of those key stepping stones is being in community and connection with fellow artists. That is actually going to open up so many doors for you. So it's not something to overlook. It's actually essential to your growth, your career growth. So I do have some journal prompts embedded throughout the workshop today. At the end of our three parts, I'll ask you a question. So the first question that I have for you is, if a curator, or let's say a gallery director, visited you or your studio today, what would signal professionalism? What might you improve on to show readiness? So I would love for you to take a moment to just jot this down in your notebook. If a curator visited you or your studio today, and I apologize, I'm noticing a little bit of a typo here. What would signal professionalism? So in other words, what do you feel you're doing really well in terms of like laying the groundwork? Maybe you feel like you have a really cohesive body of work that you're proud of, that is ready to be shown. Perhaps you feel like your artist statement is in a really good place, or you have worked really hard to secure different exhibition opportunities over the last few years. Whatever it might be, what signals professionalism? And what might you improve on to show readiness? Maybe it's speaking about your work. Maybe it's doing more studio visits. Perhaps you've explored many different ideas in your work, but you feel like you need to tighten things up a little bit and the work would benefit from being more cohesive. I don't know, but just take a moment to think on that, jot it down, um, and then we will move on. And if you would like, you can share in the chat. I may not have time to read all of your responses, but if you would like to share in the chat, you absolutely can. And we'll see what we have time for. And I think this is just a really good thing to reflect on. One thing I often encourage artists to do throughout their careers, and I try to practice this as well, is to really just take time to reflect. pen and paper, just journaling, right? Or speaking into your phone. Sometimes, if I don't actually feel like writing, I'll just do like a voice recording in my phone. But the idea is just periodically on a weekly or monthly basis, pausing and just taking time to really reflect on the work you're creating, on your goals as an artist, on the way that your career is developing, and always thinking about what you're doing well, but then also thinking honestly and objectively what you can improve on. That's how we grow. So reflection is really powerful, and I think it often brings a sense of clarity that we need, um, which is why I wanted to embed a little bit of journaling in our workshop today. So I'll give you just a moment to jot this down. The other thing I just want to share with you is when you're presenting your work, when you're talking about your work, when you do a studio visit, I just want you all to remember it's never about trying to impress someone, right? It's never about trying to impress a gallery director or a curator or a potential collector. It's about talking about your work in a way that feels honest. Authenticity is the most important thing. And if you lead with trying to impress someone or sell yourself, people can pick up on that energetically. The studio visits that I really love are studio visits with artists who often don't have everything resolved. They're still figuring things out. They might share a work in progress with me and ask for my perspective or my opinion. They might tell me things that they're grappling with currently in their practice or um, trying to work through. And there's a kind of honesty there that I really respect and appreciate and respond to. So just remember, it's not about a performance or trying to impress anyone. It's about being secure in your work, but also, uh, and most importantly, being authentic and willing to share exactly where you're at right now. So, I mean, again, I could talk about studio visits for so long, but that's just a key thing that I wanted to mention as well. Okay, we are going to go into part two, understanding the gallery model. Um, there are so many different kinds of galleries, but for today's presentation, I'm just going to focus on four because I believe these are the main four in terms of galleries to know about. But first, I want to debunk a myth. There's a myth. Uh, how do I say this? There's a myth that you only need one gallery to carry you forward, and once you have representation, you're set. That is not necessarily true. That might be true for some artists, but for most artists, we want to think about this a little bit differently. So, representation is not necessarily a finish line. It's actually one step within a much larger ecosystem that you are actively building, which is why I'm going to encourage you to stay open to different kinds of galleries and different kinds of opportunities. Just a few nights ago, I was mentoring an emerging artist in my one-on-one session over Zoom, and she shared with me that she just got represented by a gallery, and so she feels like, uh, that's kind of it. And I said to her, "Well, it's great that you got represented by this gallery, and I'm so excited for you. It sounds like a really wonderful opportunity." And I also want you to stay open to different kinds of galleries and different kinds of exhibition opportunities that could expand you and your career further. It's a balance, right? Um, so we'll talk a little bit more about that, and perhaps we can go into that during the Q&A as well. But for now, let's talk about the four main galleries and kind of how they work. So the first would be a commercial gallery. This is a gallery that, if we think about the Chelsea galleries or all these cool new galleries that are popping up in the Lower East Side or Tribeca. A commercial gallery is for profit. They are sales driven. They are focusing on collector relationships and they have a commission structure in place. This would be David Zwirner, Pace, Hauser and Wirth. Again, these galleries that we're seeing across New York City, primarily in Chelsea. Um, and I always say, I think that there are two questions that a gallery director would ask. These are the two questions I can speak from my own experience that I ask when I'm considering a new artist for representation or to show in any of our exhibitions. And the first question is, do I feel that this artist's work is in alignment with the kind of work we want to show and are excited to show at the gallery? That is number one. And number two is, do I feel I could sell this work to my collector base, right? Do I feel that my audience would be interested in this work? If you are running a commercial gallery, that's a question that you're asking because you have an overhead and you are, you're wanting to cover your costs, right? It's an expense, it's an investment to run a contemporary art gallery. So you also want to make sure that you can sell the work, not just for you, but also for the artist. You want to help the artist to make money too. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. So commercial gallery is the first one I wanted to start with. There are also nonprofit galleries, which I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with. A nonprofit gallery is different than a commercial gallery because it is mission driven. It is oftentimes grant and donor funded. So a nonprofit gallery, because they're not relying on sales for funding, they can often show work that is more experimental or socially engaged. If we think about installation work, if we think about more avant-garde kind of work, right, that might not necessarily be for sale, then that might be something that you would see at a nonprofit gallery. There are also more traditional or classical works shown at nonprofits as well. But the key difference is that they're not relying on sales for funding. They already have funding. So because of that, they're also focusing a little bit more on public programming and community involvement. Examples would be the Kitchen, MoMA PS1, the Studio Museum in Harlem. These are all really wonderful nonprofit galleries here in New York City. Then we have artist-run galleries, which I love. I love an artist-run gallery. I think they're so awesome. Seen so many over the years. They tend to be more community-centered. They are founded and operated by a group of artists. For example, Bow Gallery, which is in the Hudson Valley up in Beacon. I think there's about 20 artists that run that gallery. There are also smaller collectives where maybe there are like 5 to 10 artists that run a gallery. 440 Gallery in Park Slope, Brooklyn, Field Projects in Chelsea. Those are really great examples too. Artist-run galleries tend to be a little bit more flexible and collaborative. They are great for emerging artists. Yeah, really awesome. Then there are institutional and museum affiliated galleries, which are typically curator led, academic or historical framing, high prestige. They tend to focus on acquiring new works for a permanent collection that they are trying to expand. So if we think about the Whitney, if we think about the Brooklyn Museum, the Met, the Institute of Contemporary Art, these would be obviously operated by curators. And there is usually a sort of an emphasis on acquiring work to expand a collection. So, what does a gallery actually do? How is this beneficial for an artist? So, a gallery, when it comes to curation, they are, of course, selecting work for exhibitions. They're shaping an artist roster, contextual framing. They're thinking about program cohesion, right? They're thinking about how many exhibitions they're going to run throughout the year, and then what works are going to be curated into that exhibition. How many artists are we going to represent? all of this is being considered by a commercial gallery. So just to share with you, what I have on this slide, these key points are connected more to a commercial gallery. Collector relationships, so building collector networks, private outreach. A good gallery is typically putting a lot of time and energy into building relationships with collectors for themselves and for the artists they represent, right? Mutually beneficial. Matching collectors to artists, helping to facilitate sales. They usually have something like an artsy presence. If you're familiar with artsy, um, I think that a good gallery would invest in having an artsy presence for sure. Marketing, press and announcements, email, social media. I think a social media presence for a contemporary gallery is key in this day and age. Online viewing rooms, which we create through Artsy for our gallery. And all of this is to amplify artist visibility and gallery visibility. And then art fairs. So not all galleries participate in art fairs, but many do. We started participating in art fairs last year, and our goal at Warren's Contemporary, which is my gallery here in Brooklyn, is to grow the number of fairs and the kinds of fairs we're participating in the coming years. Fairs are key, I think, for sales. We were able to significantly grow our collector base last year just from participating in two fairs in New York City. We were able to pretty much triple our collector base, which was incredible. So I think that not all galleries participate in fairs, like I said, but I think that it's a really strategic move on the part of a gallery to consider that. Working with the right gallery ultimately boosts your visibility, right? Through their email marketing, through their social media, through fairs that they're participating in, connects your work with aligned collectors and strategically advances your career through their efforts. But let's talk about pros and cons. And I know there was a question about this in the chat, because I also want to share with you transparently that um, working with a gallery is not always a perfect, it's like any relationship, it's not always perfect. And sometimes it can come with limitations. Just want to be really honest about that. I think that one of the strongest positions you can be in as an artist is to partner with a gallery that feels aligned and also to continue building your career independently. I'll share a very quick story with you, which is that when I graduated from SVA in 2012, I was picked up by a really wonderful gallery pretty much right away. They were selling my work right out of art school, and I felt like I had made it. In fact, I felt like I didn't really need to do anything other than make my work. Eventually, the gallery closed down, and I felt like I had lost everything, which is a huge part of why I do all the work I'm doing today to mentor and empower and encourage artists, because I had an experience early on where I felt like I lost a collector base, I lost my audience, I lost my gallery, and I didn't know how to effectively market and sell my work independently when that happened. So I felt like I was dependent on a gallery, that I was reliant on a gallery to do those things for me, which I don't want any artist to feel, right? If we think about going into a healthy relationship, you enter a healthy relationship when you're not dependent on someone, but rather you're independent and they bring something additional to you or to your life. They enrich your life in some way, but you're not dependent on them. So it's the same thing that I want to encourage you. The way I want to encourage you to think about working with galleries, I want you to know how to market and sell your own work before you consider working with a gallery. And actually, that's very attractive to galleries as well, right? So let's talk about the pros and cons. A pro of working with a good gallery is that ideally they would expand your collector access. Uh, they would market your work basically to a new audience. They would increase visibility and credibility, sales support and infrastructure, exhibition and fair opportunities. So those would be the four key things, I think. Cons, because there are cons. There is a commission split. Usually it's up to 50%. That's very normal, especially for a brick and mortar gallery. An online gallery, it's probably going to be closer to 20%, 30%, or 40%. But for a brick and mortar gallery that has an overhead, you're probably looking at a 50% commission split. You also have less control, right? You have a team of people now managing your sales and who you are connecting with. So you do not have as much control. It can be limiting. One of my close friends, who is a prolific artist with a huge social media presence and has really worked hard to build and grow her career over the past decade, shared with me last year that she decided to leave her gallery, not because they weren't selling her work, not because they weren't expanding visibility for her, but because she felt creatively and artistically limited by them. She felt that she wanted to explore different themes and subjects in her work, but they wanted her to keep creating the thing that they knew would sell, right? There was a particular kind of style that they loved and that they knew they could sell if she continued to create it, but she wanted to move on and she wanted her work to evolve. And so she ultimately decided to leave so that she would have more flexibility for her creative work. And also, the pace may feel slower than independent selling, especially if it's a new gallery that is just starting to build and grow their collector base. There are some artists that I've worked with who have actually had more success selling independently, and they've sold a higher volume of work independently than through a gallery. And it goes both ways. I've also worked with artists that have sold significantly more through a gallery than independent sales. But I just want you to have a balanced perspective. Working with a gallery does not necessarily mean that now you've made it and you don't, right, have to do anything. There are pros and cons to every kind of relationship. And so I think it's important to be aware before you enter a gallery relationship of what those pros and cons are. But ultimately, a gallery, when it comes to what they're looking for an artist that they might be considering working with, is an artist that has a long-term vision, an artist who's going to be sustained with their commitment and their dedication to the practice and evidence of growth. An artist who has, like I said, a cohesive body of work, reliable output, and professionalism. This is so important, you guys. Responding to emails on time, keeping a friendly but professional demeanor. I've worked with artists through my gallery in the past who were amazing artists, incredible artists. And actually, I knew I could sell their work and I did sell their work, but perhaps I couldn't continue working with them because it was very challenging in terms of contacting them, being able to reach them, emailing them, right, and not hearing back for weeks at a time. That was really tough for me as a gallery director. So your work, having strong work behind you is a really important thing, but also think about how you communicate. Are you someone that responds to emails in a timely manner? Are you someone that's going to help to promote when a gallery has an exhibition? Um, are you someone who is going to be receptive to feedback? Like, think about how you are with interacting, and is there any, room for growth there? Because I can tell you that the artists that I work with at my gallery that I have the best relationships with are artists that I have also like a human to human connection with. I know that I can reach them. They're reliable. We have good communication. It just, you feel like you're in a flow. So that's also incredibly important. Again, this is a little bit of a recap. Strong documentation, clear pricing, exhibition history. I think, yeah, kind of skip down here, but receptive to feedback, reliable communication. I just want to really instill within you today that working with a gallery is a partnership and it's a collaboration in a lot of ways. And just keeping that at the forefront as you consider, perhaps working with them. So the question that I have for you as we start to wrap up this section is, what feels most exciting to you when you think about working with a gallery? If you think about a gallery that would be really supportive of you and your career, what feels exciting specifically? Can you write that down? Is it that they might take you to a really cool art fair? Are you excited about the possibility of them introducing you to new collectors? What is it that you feel excited about? And then what might you want to explore further to find the right fit if this path feels aligned? So, what I mean by my second question here is, Is there anything that you feel like you need to consider a little bit more when it comes to finding a gallery that feels like the right fit, if you even want to go the gallery route? Because something I want to remind you today is that working with a gallery is not the only option. There are so many successful artists that I know personally that sell their work independently, uh, through social media, through their newsletter, and actually don't work intentionally, have made a decision not to work with galleries. And that's also okay. We're living in a day and age where you have so many possibilities for how you can grow and build your career as an artist. So just remember that working with galleries is one option, but it's certainly not the only option. So just take a moment to think, does this feel aligned for you? And if so, what are some of those things that you would be really looking for in a gallery? What do you feel excited about? And I'll give you a moment to jot that down.
I'm just gonna jump in for 1 second time check. We are almost at 12:05.
Yes, Stella, I was just noticing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm gonna zoom through part three and then we will get to uh
The
the
Q&A.
yes, yes.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you guys can tell Victoria spent a lot of time preparing for this presentation for you all. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Thank you. I know. I feel like it always goes longer than I intend, but I'm try and stick to my points. There's so much in each of these sections in each of the three parts that could truly be their own workshop, but we will try to get through as much as we can in the time that we have. So let me move on to part three. And if you need a few moments to finish up answering those questions, feel free. And again, I'm going to send you the PDF so you'll have a copy and you can return to any of these prompts later on. But let's go into cultivating relationships with galleries and curators. Um, when we think about building a career, it's a long game, right? We want everything to feel intentional. We don't want to feel rushed with our decision making or rushed with our output. Like, I want you to really slow down and think about meaningful, thoughtful interactions and the way that you can approach your career with intention. So, thoughtfulness. Engaging thoughtfully. What I'm going to suggest to you, if there's a gallery that you love on social media, first build familiarity through social media, through Instagram. So I'm sure some of you might already be doing this, but when you think, I'll use Mazzy Klein as an example because they are one of my favorite galleries here in New York City. I would take some time every week to interact with their posts. I would like their posts. I would comment on their posts, something thoughtful, and I would start to build up some familiarity that way. Whoever is running the social media, sometimes it is the gallery director, sometimes it is a curator that is connected to the gallery. They are going to start to see your username popping up. They're going to start to build familiarity with you that way. Support their programming. I always say it's great to attend an opening reception, but I think what's even better is going to an artist talk or a workshop that they're holding, because typically those are less crowded and there might be fewer people in attendance, and it gives you an opportunity to really make a connection. Um, One thing I'm going to suggest to you is that if you do attend an artist talk at a gallery or perhaps a workshop that they're leading to promote a current exhibition, within a few days after attending, write a really friendly and warm but professional email thanking them for hosting that event. Something like, "Hey, thank you so much for, the artist talk that you facilitated at the gallery this past weekend. I'm so glad I got to attend. It was really inspiring." Share a few specifics that stood out to you. Even if they don't reply to your email, this is part of you reaching out and being thoughtful and building familiarity and advocating for yourself. Avoid cold DMs and mass pitches. If I had $1 for every cold email I received from an artist that was simply something like, "Hey, I really like your platform," or "I really like your gallery. Can you show my work?" I would have a lot of dollars if that was the case. But to be completely honest with you, I don't. open or answer those kinds of emails because they don't feel thoughtful. They feel like whoever is sending them is just sending them to tons and tons of galleries. What I do respond to, or what I try to respond to, I don't always have the capacity or the bandwidth to respond to every email or message that I get, but I'm far more likely to respond to an email or a message that opens with something really thoughtful and specific to my gallery. Maybe it's in response to our current exhibition. Perhaps it's, that this artist met me at an art fair and they share some things about our booth and what stood out to them, because I can actually tell they put thought and intention into writing to me versus just asking me to show their work. Um, Showing up consistently. So, again, regular studio practice, long term commitment, increasing your own visibility, and then a follow up. One thing I want to share with you is if or when you submit to an opportunity, let's say an open call for a juried exhibition, and your submission is declined, I'm going to encourage you to still write an email or a message to the curator, to the juror, or to the organization and thank them for taking the time to review your submission. This is something that not a lot of artists do. And if you do, it will be recognized. I can tell you right now. Just send a quick thank you and that you appreciate them taking the time to review your submission. It does make a difference. And then if you are curated into that particular exhibition, definitely send a thank you. But all of this is leading with kindness and generosity and thoughtfulness, and it's part of building relationships, always being gracious. As a curator, right, and I have served as a juror for a number of opportunities, I've received emails and messages that were not kind from artists who were not curated in and were actually very unkind towards me, um, almost like sort of personally attacking me for not curating them in. And I always think to myself, that's probably not someone I would want to work with in the future. But anytime an artist that was not accepted sends me like a personal email or a message to thank me anyway, I always think to myself, like, I'm going to make a note of this person's name because they're so nice. Maybe I can work with them in the future. So just write something anyway. Always be gracious and always come from a place of gratitude, even if you feel disappointed. Speaking of thoughtfulness, what I'm going to recommend to you is that when you are researching any kind of opportunity, gallery, organization that you might want to work with, just be sure that you are jotting down notes that are specific, especially if you're planning to reach out to them, that you demonstrate familiarity with their program if you are going to send them a cold email, that you have a direct but professional tone, and that your email or your message is somewhat concise. Not too concise, but you want to have some specificity in there, but something that is going to be digestible. Okay, alignment is greater than volume. So targeting outreach over mass emailing. Start with a few galleries or organizations that you really love and respect, and just include a few things that stood out to you that are specific, making sure that there's that alignment. It's about the quality of connection over quantity, and having an approach that is intentional and strategic is going to move you forward rather than just sending mass emails or DMs to every gallery that you can find on Instagram. I'm sure none of you would do that, but I have seen that before. And then following up without pressure, polite, spaced follow-ups, again, a gracious and professional tone. Never want to lead with urgency or entitlement. So this is why I say when you reach out to a gallery or a curator, you never want to open with the ask. You never want to open that email or that message by asking them to show your work. You want to open with something meaningful about their gallery that you admire or respect. So if you're writing, let's say, an individual email or message to a curator, share with them a few things about their curatorial work that you really respect. Maybe they curated a show at a museum last year that you thought was phenomenal and inspired you. Write a little bit about that. Maybe you're reaching out to a gallery director who just opened an exhibition, and you had a chance to swing by and it really impacted you, like write about that, because that is going to be so much more well received than something that does not have any specificity. It's about building relationships the same way that you would build a relationship with someone you wanted to be friends with, right? Or have a personal connection with. You kind of want to keep that in mind as you build a connection with someone in the art world. I just want to recap for a moment with studio visits because I'm going to circle back to this. Studio visits are so important. They're an opportunity for you to gain feedback and encouragement and to get a new perspective on your work. But it's also a way for you to strengthen your network in a way that often leads to future opportunities. And again, if you haven't done a studio visit before or you're feeling a little bit intimidated, start with fellow artists, artists that you know, and practice that way before reaching out to an art world professional. When to schedule a studio visit, I would say after completing a new body of work, but also perhaps while you're in the process of creating a new body of work. That can be a really great time. Before an exhibition or a deadline, anytime you're ready to share progress and gather insight. I really don't think there's ever a bad time. The only time is if you have your work or the bulk of your work is currently in an exhibition, you just don't have much to show. But otherwise, I think it's always kind of a good time to have a studio visit and what to talk about, your process, what you're exploring, upcoming plans, goals, or questions. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You can certainly share with whoever's visiting your studio what you're grappling with, questions that you have. You don't have to know everything in terms of what you're doing. You just have to have an idea and be willing to share authentically. One of the best tips that I can give you is to allow room for pause when you are hosting a studio visit and to ask thoughtful questions. Sometimes when we're nervous, we just talk so much, and I've done that as well. But allow room for pause, allow room to sit in the silence. Um, okay, so this is the last question I have for you, and then we're actually going to start wrapping up and moving into the Q&A. What is one intentional step that you can take to begin cultivating a genuine relationship with a curator or a gallery? Just jot down whatever comes into your mind. What is one intentional step that you can take to begin cultivating a genuine relationship with a curator or a gallery? It could be as simple as following them on Instagram and starting to engage with their posts. It could be sending them a DM or an email and sharing with them that you really loved and appreciated their current exhibition. It could be if you already have a little bit of a connection with a curator or a gallery director, it could be inviting them to come for a studio visit. And it could even be just attending an event at a local gallery that you really love. Like maybe there's an artist talk coming up, maybe there's a workshop that you could attend, but just really think what's one thing that's going to move you in that direction. It could be to send a thank you note to a curator that you worked with last year. It's never too late. Just send them a thank you note and see if there might be any opportunities coming up. But just keeping those connections, it's facilitating it's cultivating those connections, but then it's also maintaining the connections, maintaining those relationships as well. Okay, so would love to stay connected with all of you. My Instagram is Visionary Art Collective. My website is, well, for my company is visionaryartcollective.com. Would love to, if you follow me, I'll do my best to try and follow you back, or you can send a DM. Would just love to stay connected with you beyond today. And I did want to share with you. So, right now, I think I opened last week. I have a limited number of one-on-one strategy sessions that I only open a few times a year. So, these are 45-minute sessions that I lead over Zoom with new artists who I haven't had the chance to work with yet, where we can strategize next steps for your art career. I only keep them open for about a week, and I'm actually almost fully booked up. But if you are feeling today after this workshop that you would love to connect with me and do a 45-minute session together where we can really strategize next steps for your art career, I'll share the link. And it's limited to one session per artist. And then I also have my one-on-one mentorship program, which I kind of lead throughout the year, but right now I'm reviewing applications for the spring. So if you feel like you would like to work together more in depth, my one-on-one mentorship program is for 3 months. It is individual support for artists who are ready to grow their art careers, and I'm taking on a limited number of spots for the spring beginning next month in March. So I'll provide those links as well. And yeah, we can move into the Q&A. Take you off my screen share.
All right, people, do just use the raise hand icon right next to the share screen, and I'm gonna call you. You just unmute yourself and ask away.
Amazing.
Nobody? Oh, Lori, please.
Hi. This thing about consistency is something that always hangs me up. Um, I have been able to sell, most of the stuff I sell is landscapes, but I really love doing figurative work that tells stories. Um, which should I do? Should I do both? How do I approach a problem like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lori. You can absolutely do both. I never want you to feel artistically or creatively limited, but I do think there's something to be said for pushing forward with one of those series or collections, putting a little bit more time and energy into one, and perhaps choosing one that you're going to lead with professionally. I always say to artists, because this is the approach I follow as well, do all the things. I mean, I draw, I paint, I've been taking printmaking classes, do all the things that you want to do. You have to do that for yourself as an artist. That's the most important thing at the end of the day. But choose a body of work that you want to push forward with and lead with. And it doesn't mean you can't show or share any of the other works as well. You absolutely can. You just have to be a little bit strategic about how to balance that. But yeah, I would choose one that you feel is going to be the best to kind of lead with on social media or through your exhibitions. And I think that's going to be easier for you to manage as well. Hopefully that helps.
Anybody else? Don't be shy. This is your chance. That's why we're here.
I have a question, but I don't know how to raise my hand.
Well, that's okay.
Okay, I didn't see it. My name is Susan McHale. I live in Connecticut. So I've been working a long time. I've started doing these larger pieces, and I was wondering if they always have to be framed. I I took them to this man who I bought these big canvases, and I bought these he put these big grommets at the top so they're hanging. And some people have given me feedback and said, oh, well, that's not cool enough, or that you have to frame these huge pieces. I mean, I'm going to be spending so much money framing those. And I really like the grommets. So, what is your feeling about that?
The grommets can be really cool. My friend Christy Gordon, who's a painter and exhibits all over New York City, she was in a show last year where she had this massive painting on unstretched canvas and hung it with grommets, and it looked beautiful. It almost read like a tapestry, which actually connected to the theme of her work as well because she pulls from art history. Um, you can also, I mean, I've seen artists displaying work with dowels. So I showed my work recently, my large watercolor paintings, and I used magnets, which I've seen more and more artists do as well. I was at a show last year at the Oculus, and there was an artist there who did these large scale drawings and just used magnets to adhere them to the wall, which I thought was really cool. So I think there is more flexibility now. I've been seeing more sort of innovative ways of exhibiting flat, larger works than I have in the past. But it really depends because if there's a gallery you're working with and they prefer framing, then that might be, but I think it's always a conversation with whoever you are exhibiting with to see what they're open to.
Thank you. Yeah. I have two daughters who live in Maine, so
Oh,
cool.
lovely. Oh, very cool. Love Maine. Maine is like my happy place for sure. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And great question. Laura, I saw your hand go up.
Hi, thanks. So my question is, a lot of the galleries seem to charge you to exhibit. Is that something that we should avoid? Is that just cost of doing business? Like how should we look at that?
That's such a good question, Laura. And I should have actually put this in the presentation when we talked about different kinds of galleries. So this is, yeah, this is a really good thing to be talking about. When it comes to something like an open call, like a gallery or a project space or an organization that has an open call, there are typically entry fees that range from, let's say, $25 to maybe $50. And normally, that organization would have a statement on the submission form sharing with you where those funds are being allocated. Typically, it's to pay the juror or a juried panel, and it goes towards covering costs for the exhibition. Anything beyond, let's say, a $50 entry fee, which $50 would be on the higher end as well, I would not recommend pursuing. So if it's something like a gallery that's charging you for wall space, maybe it's upwards of $100. Sometimes it can be over $1,000. I would never recommend pursuing that opportunity. This is what I would call a vanity gallery. It's a business model that I really don't believe in and would never follow myself. And what happens and why I think this is actually like a really poor business model, just to be completely transparent with you, is because the gallery is now treating the artist as the client. So that gallery is not actually, in my opinion, going to have any motivation to find and secure collectors because they've already been paid by the artists. Whereas, like in my gallery, and for most commercial galleries that follow a little bit more of a traditional model, we're doing a 50-50 split with the artist. We've got overhead too. I'm motivated to find collectors for the artist and for me and my gallery because we need to. Now, if I'm getting paid thousands by the artists up front, I might not have that same incentive or motivation. So that would fall under a vanity gallery, and no, I would not recommend pursuing it.
All right, Christy, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you. This was great. Lots of good information. I'm actually Mary Lou. This is Christine over here. But question is, I heard that from someone who's a very well-known artist, has sold tremendous amounts of work. When I mentioned that I was, looking to get into a particular gallery, I was poo-pooed and said, galleries today only want artists that are first of all younger and also that have MFAs.
That's a really good question. I try to avoid general statements because there are thousands of galleries. And so not all of them are going to be looking for artists that have MFAs or are under a certain age, But there will always be galleries that operate that way. They're probably just not the kind of gallery that you would want to work with. And this goes back to functioning from an empowered perspective, right? For me, I wouldn't even be eligible for a gallery that is looking for an MFA student. There are galleries here in New York City and across the country that pluck students right from the MFA program because they want to start their careers and work with them long term. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's just part of how they operate. That wouldn't be the right fit for me. I would want to find a gallery that is a little bit more open and would feel like they're in alignment with where I'm at now in my career and the kind of work that I create. So yes, to answer your question, there are galleries that exist that way, but that is a really small percentage of galleries. So yeah, I think, it's really hard when people make these like generalizations because we start to think, oh my gosh, that all galleries function this way, and they don't. I mean, at my gallery, we've worked with artists of all different ages and backgrounds. The first artist that I represented at my gallery doesn't even have a BFA. He's completely self-taught, but I believe in his work. I knew that we could sell his work. I knew that we would have interest. We've sold so many of his paintings. We've brought him to art fairs, and it was never even a question for me, even though he didn't have a BFA or formal training. So it comes down to finding a gallery that believes in you and your work. And I truly feel that a gallery that's only interested in you if you have an MFA or whatever age you are, it's just not the right fit, you know?
Thank you, because that kind of put a little pin in the balloon, that
Yeah.
statement. Yeah, so
Yeah, it feels discouraging, but I promise you, there are so many really good galleries out there that are run by directors who are looking more at the work and the quality of the work, and do they feel they have an audience for the work than the credentials and the age and things like that.
and that was also what when you mentioned before about how you'll look at a piece of work, and even if it's a strong work, if it's not cropped properly or something,
Yeah.
it's kind of bypassed.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that, you're looking at that artist that has a strong is very strong in their work and their voice, and wouldn't somebody just kind of say, come, let me help you,
I
let me
mean, it's
let's
tough.
recrop this, you know
But at the end of the day, I will say that's the artist's responsibility
I
because
am, yeah,
sometimes I'm reviewing a submission and it's like I can tell the work is strong, but it's so blurry and grainy. And then it brings up other questions for me, like, how is it going to be to work with this artist if they're not, if they are still working on photographing their work, like I want to work with an artist that knows how to photograph their work.
yeah.
And don't get me wrong, some of the artists I've worked with through my gallery, in fact, actually one I did a studio visit with yesterday, she shared with me from the beginning that she really needs help photographing her work. And so I am actually helping her with that. But I didn't discover her through an open call. I met her in a more organic, I saw her work in person for the first time. But anyway, so I think it's a really good point that you make. But I do think that every artist should know how to photograph their work. It's important. Or if it's just a struggle, you can hire someone to do it too. It's an investment, but it's a worthwhile
Right.
investment.
Yeah, and I don't have too much of a problem,
Yeah.
photographing, glare
Yeah.
and things like that. But I would feel bad if somebody was passed over just because that's just how,
Yeah,
how I feel for someone.
totally.
But
And I get what
I
you're saying.
understand.
Yeah, it is one of the key things I would say when it comes to like the making of the work and the documentation of the work, I think are the two biggest things. So I think just working on that, because then it shows you're ready. I think there's a readiness and a professionalism that the
Mhm.
director or the juror can pick up on. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I probably have curated artists into things in before that didn't have the most stellar images. But it is a huge there's just a sense of readiness when you see
Sure.
professionally photographed work. But yeah, I see where you're coming from too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks so much.
Christy. I'm
Thank you.
going to jump in with two questions from the chat box, then followed by Shreya. So the first question is how to vet a gallery for trustworthiness. Second question, kind of the same, is we don't know a lot of galleries. What's a good way to find them? What portal or search terms?
Yeah, vetting a gallery, I think a huge part of it is visiting in person. If you can visit in person, it's ideal. Get a sense of the work, get a sense of the space, get a sense of the people who work there. Um, I don't want to sound super woo-woo, but I think there's also an energy to this. Sometimes you see a gallery online and then you go in person and it's not the right energy, it's not the right vibe. If there's a gallery that you really love and you're interested in working with, again, attend their programming, sign up for their newsletter, follow them on social media. One thing I also recommend is following some of the artists that are represented by that gallery on Instagram. And if you do at some point cultivate a connection with one of those artists and you can meet for coffee or you can have a conversation with them, you can always ask them in a really kind of neutral way how their experience has been, attend some of the opening receptions. I think there's really no shortcut other than like putting in the work to get a feel for the space. And you can do that by visiting online and then also following along with their digital presence as well. Um, and just kind of noticing like I'm at a point now where I can go to a gallery's website and pretty much within 30 seconds know if it's like a good gallery or not because I can see the way that they've structured their website. If it's outdated or not super organized, I'm thinking that's probably not the only thing that's not, or like the way that you build trust is across all of your materials. So for me, like I want an artist to go to the Warren's Contemporary website and for it to feel fresh and up to date and easy to navigate. That's the same thing with our social media and then when we have an exhibition in person. But like if you're also noticing that their Instagram isn't very well curated and is a little bit discombobulated, this all kind of it's a vibe, it's an energy. So I always appreciate and I think you can tell pretty quickly when a gallery puts that kind of intention and energy out. And then in terms of finding galleries, I really think it's starting with your local community. Even when I work with artists that live in really rural areas, if they tell me that they want to work with a gallery or they have a goal of gaining representation, I always encourage them to start with whatever galleries they have locally, even if it's just a few. I think of it like concentric circles and expanding out from there. Um, so yes, just thinking about that.
Thank you. Shreya, you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much, firstly, for this wonderful session. Thank you. And my name is Shreya, and you know, I love more of figurative and portrait work. Till now, like till some time ago, I was more working from reference pictures, but lately, I found more inclination towards contemporary work, which is figurative too. Now, when I think about a subject, social messages around me, comes to my mind first. So my question, and this is something that confuses me sometimes, how often work that are inclined more towards social message accepted by the galleries? They need not be always happy ones. And as
Mm.
we know, as a collector, we always are looking for something happy, to get into our walls. So coming from that point, like, how do you think, how the subject uh, like plays a role when your work is accepted by a gallery or any collector?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it kind of circles back to what I was sharing before, which is it's finding a gallery that's the right fit. I mean, there are some galleries that really prioritize portraiture. I've worked extensively with Sergio Gomez, who is a gallery director he was in Chicago for 20 years. He just relocated to Florida. And he gravitates towards portraiture, all different kinds of portraiture, but that is the thing that he's really become known for through his gallery. So would he take on an artist who focuses more on conceptual work or even like, let's say, landscape or still life? Probably not. I don't want to say no, but galleries have the thing that they are looking for, and some are a little bit more open and some are more niche and specific. So, Shreya, I always say to every artist, make the kind of work that you want to make and then see if you can find a gallery. If you do want to work with a gallery, again, it's not the only option, but if you do want to work with a gallery, it's about finding one that aligns with what you're already creating. I never recommend changing your style or working in a different subject or um, like choosing a different concept or theme for your work because you're trying to get into a gallery, because then it's not authentic, it's not as authentic anymore. You have to create what you want to create first. And I can almost guarantee you that you will find a gallery that is interested. So when you say maybe more issues like social issues or like there are galleries that support that kind of work, and it's just doing a little bit of research to find one that
Right.
is in alignment.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We have two more questions, and we're gonna cut off right here after these two questions in the chat box. The first one is, and I just lost my place. I love to hear thoughts on pricing. I understand this is a much bigger conversation, but whatever Victoria can share with us, that would be great. The second question is from where is it? Oh, when artists are starting out, do vanity galleries count towards your CV?
Um, Let me think on this. I think when you're starting out, you could still include it on your CV, depending. I mean, I really try to be careful with general advice because it's really case by case. But I think that if you have participated in a gallery that might be considered a vanity, but you don't have a lot of other exhibitions, I think it would be okay to include just to show that you've exhibited. But I think you just have to really be cautious because there are some you also don't want to have things on your CV just for the sake of it. You want everything to feel really like intentional. And I feel like I'm overusing that word today, but I would, yeah, I would kind of need to know which, like, it depends. General advice, I would say just leave it there for now. And then as you start to exhibit more, you can start to pull those off. I mean, to be honest, when I started exhibiting, when I was out of art school, I did fall prey to some of those vanity galleries too. I didn't know at the time. I mean, this was like 15 years ago. So, but at this point, right, I've started to pull those off my CV. So I think just over time. And I would also say, like, focusing on local in-person exhibitions is a really good rule of thumb too. I had a great conversation with Caitlin Kelly McKenna, who's a gallery director. Um, she has a beautiful, beautiful space in New Jersey. And we talked about this. She was saying how she would rather work with an artist that is shown at the local library than some big, flashy exhibition overseas at like an international, because it shows that you are not just doing this for like that your heart is in it. Do you know what I mean? So I think over time, like prioritize those smaller local exhibitions. And over time you can start to pull off anything that just doesn't feel like you would want to share. But if you have participated in some, like if you have worked with the vanity, it's nothing to feel embarrassed or ashamed about. I have too. I think many of us fall prey to this at the beginning of our careers, but just know that it's okay to shift and find opportunities that feel a little bit more aligned.
I think that's all the questions we have. And Victoria, would you like to share your contact information if any of the artists would like to ask you? Because I know we didn't really have time to answer the pricing. Um,
Yeah. What
I,
I'll do, yes, thank you, Stella. So I'm actually going to share with you all, and this is something I really never do when I teach guest lectures or workshops, but I am going to do it today because there are so many thoughtful questions, and I would love to support you further. So I'm going to share with you my personal email address, which is victoriajfry@gmail.com. That's where you can reach me directly. Most DMs I miss on social media, just to give you a heads up. I don't see half of them. So if you send me an email to my personal email address, I will do my best to get back to you. Just know that with my schedule, it can take me up to 5 business days to respond. But if you have a question or you want to shoot me a message or you're interested in working together at some point in one of my programs or courses, just send me an email there and I'd be happy to reply to whatever it is you are curious about.
and that concludes our webinar today. Thank you all so much for taking time from your super busy schedule on Saturday joining us. And thank you so much, Victoria, for giving us such a fabulous presentation. And who knows, maybe we will invite her back again in person next time.
That would be amazing. Thank you all so much. This was such an honor, and yeah, Stella, thank you, and so grateful to meet all of you today. Thank you,
All right.
everyone. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you. Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.